This is one of my favorite books that I've read recently, and it's basically the story of Scott Adams. And he's written a few books now, and he's best known for being the author of the comic strip Dilbert, which has been very popular for office workers, especially. I think Dilbert was a computer engineer. I think, I think a lot of office workers relate to the comic strip because it's satire on office culture and stuff. So this book is one of my favorites. It shows basically an autobiography in very piecemeal knowledge of his life. So let's get into it. So this book, I read it a few years ago, and I think I came upon it from just looking at the New York Times bestseller, and I really like his writing style. It's kind of dry pan, but it basically this book goes through his life story, and he tries to distill valuable lessons in a few chapters, in probably 20, 30 chapters actually, now when I look back on the book, that are very important to him, that he thinks helped him get to his success. And there's a few underlying themes that he breaks down in the book, and I'll try to go over them, what I think is super interesting and useful, and what I find, what I really took away from the book. But I think when you look at Scott Adams, you kind of see the prototypical entrepreneur qualities. Like he tries many many different things. Like actually, when you go through the book, like you would think that this guy is a little bit like crazy, his work ethic, because he tries so many different business ideas, and when he hits a roadblock in his life, he does not give up. He like pivots and goes somewhere else, where I think is really, really interesting with this guy. Like, okay, so let's go and look at his profile, Wikipedia. So, right, he was born in 1950. He, got his MBA from UC Berkeley, and he started off as an office worker. So, in the book, he goes through. In one section, he describes his tenure at two telecom companies like Pacific Bell, and he basically is able to climb the corporate ladder. And at each stage in his career, he kind of reaches this point where his manager tells him, I just don't have a quota to promote you, or the promotion becomes very out of his control. So he goes and does a totally different industry, or like he first switches from one to a competitor. And then the second one, that's when he starts doing Dilbert. So you can see that he's very, very smart in terms of like learning stuff. He does his MBA, I believe, part time, and then he's able to kind of pivot to, like, he's always upgrading himself in terms of education, and he's always willing to pivot. And in the book, one of the main themes is goals versus systems thinking. So, well, what does he mean by this? So, goals is like, it's very simple. It's very like one word type of outcome. There's only one outcome. So you either obtain it or you don't. But systems thinking, or what he describes in the book, is even if you fail at obtaining that goal, you still learn different skills and different different, like, essentially skills that you can take on to the next your next adventure, or your next project. So even though, like, say I'm working in a startup, the startup goes under, but if I develop speaking skills, I develop programming skills, that's what's going to help me in my career ultimately. Because even if I don't get to where I go in that one startup, I'm going to develop the skills that will help me success, that will give me success. So as I mentioned, he goes through his time as a corporate worker, and how he's able to kind of climb the ladder, which I think you see it kind of come out satirically in his Dilbert comic. So he ventures into Dilbert, because when he was 6 years old, he mentions that he always loves drawing. Like, I think it's mentioned here and in the book from what I remember. So he always loved drawing, and it was something that he had done, and he recollects from a young age that he always liked doing. So he comes up upon it basically after his second job, and he was very, very persistent, and kind of how he got discovered, and his whole process is pretty amazing. So you have to admire his kind of resiliency in doing this. And another thing is, during that time, when Dilbert took off, he made quite a bit of, he started to make a lot of money, and he still was trying like crazy different things. So there's a list in the chapter of how he does lots of different stuff. Like the story of the Dilberito, like you should read upon this, is pretty hilarious. Like he tries to make essentially a meal for people who don't get all their nutrients or are too busy. So he tries to develop this essentially a burrito that has all the vitamins and nutrients that you need during the day, but it tastes horrible. So he goes through that like, and there's countless other things that he tries, which is really, really admirable. So I think from that alone, it's worth reading this book. And he goes through, like, I found the main takeaway was this goals versus systems. But if you just search online, you can kind of see the outline of the book, and there's a lot of different kind of like mini lessons. Like he's obviously a super smart guy too, because he is part of Mensa, which is like the 98 or 99th percentile IQ of people taking a test. So yeah, he goes through a lot of different mini lessons and his life experience, which I think is very unique. And he overcame a few, very rare diseases, and one that affected his ability to draw as a cartoonist, and one where he had a speaking disorder at a time. He was doing a lot of public speaking. So a lot of strange and unfortunate things happened to him, but he was able to overcome it. And he kind of applied a similar methodology to everything in his life. Like when he had these kind of rare diseases that a lot of medical professionals weren't sure what they were, he was able to kind of do a lot of research and also see a lot of specialists that was able to treat the disease. So he was able to try a lot of different things, which is one of the underlying messages, I think, of this book that that is apparent in many different entrepreneurs. And there's a whole section also too on his health and fitness, on dieting, what he does, and he applies a similar methodology. So there's a section about his health and fitness where he describes he doesn't really like working out. I think I'm similar to, like, I don't really like to work out. I actually really don't like it, especially like running, something that's cardio and your brain doesn't really do much. So, you have to listen to something, but he just described it to make a systematic routine. It's something that you do every day so that it doesn't feel like working out. So, he goes and he describes playing tennis a lot, and running and whatnot, but it's something that is just part of his day. So if you make it a routine, say I wake up 5 a.m. every morning, I'm going to do this YouTube, or I'm going to work out. It's just something you don't really think about. It's just something you do all the time. So, making it part of a routine was very important for him. So after those medical scares, he kind of like addresses this type of fitness and happiness at the end of the book. So I think it's a very interesting read, and there's a lot of takeaway points to take away from it that I can't really distill. But in these 7 or 8 points that I just thought about when I was thinking back upon the book, I think they're very important. I really enjoyed the book, and I think you should check it out.